Chapter 7:16. Time flew by, and soon half a year had passed. On this day, the aura in Ling Shiqi's secret room was surging. The aura was visible to the naked eye under the blessing of the yin and yang spirit gathering formation with thousands of mid-grade spirit stones. Not only the aura, but also all kinds of spiritual power between heaven and earth were gathering madly. The secret room was like a black hole, constantly devouring all the spiritual power. In the center of the formation, Ling Shiqi sat cross-legged, and there was a flickering light in his dantian. What Ling Shiqi was doing now was to break through the realm of oneness of heaven and men. The realm of oneness of heaven and men was the last level of the four realms of heaven and men. Naturally, it was not so easy to break through. Spirit cultivators of Gang's spirit realm combined external forces with their own spiritual power and stole a trace of spiritual power between heaven and earth to condense Gang's spirit. At the same time, the spiritual power in their body also solidified into a spirit crystal. In the process from the first level of Gang's spirit realm to the 9th level, the spirit crystal would become larger and more solid. And the more powerful the cultivation method was, the more solid the spirit crystal would be. Ling Shiqi was like this. His spirit crystal was at least several times more than that of ordinary Gang's spirit realm cultivators. If one wanted to break through the realm of Gang's spirit realm to oneness of heaven and men, one had to do an extremely difficult thing, that was to break one's own spirit crystal. Yes, a spirit cultivator finally condensed the spirit crystal, but in the end, he had to break it. Because the realm of oneness of heaven and men was not only cultivating one's own spiritual power, but also communicating with the spiritual power of various elements in this world. Using the spiritual power of heaven and earth to replace one's own spiritual power was called oneness of heaven and men. As the essence of spiritual power of spirit cultivators, the spirit crystal had to be broken to achieve oneness of heaven and men if one wanted to cleanse the mortal body. However, it was easier said than done to break the spirit crystal. It was certainly not possible to rely on one's own strength, but if one asked for help, one's cultivation would be directly destroyed, which would not work either. The only way was to communicate with and mobilize the spiritual power of heaven and earth to break the spirit crystal. Unfortunately, how could the spiritual power of heaven and earth be mobilized at will? Therefore, at this point, comprehension was particularly important, even more important than the talent of cultivating spiritual power. Generally speaking, the geniuses in those sects were mainly talented in cultivation. Their cultivation methods were twice the result with half the effort. Perhaps it would only take a few years to achieve what others had achieved in more than 10 years. But after reaching the peak of Gang's spirit realm, the advantage in this respect would become smaller and smaller. Spiritual power could be replaced by many foreign objects. For example, Ling Shiqi had reached the peak of Gang's spirit realm by constantly swallowing Tiangang elixirs and refining all the Millennium Black Tortoise saliva in the past 6 months. However, comprehension wasn't something that could be provided by external objects. You were born with how much you had, and it couldn't be changed. Now that it was time for comprehension, many of the so-called geniuses were confused. There were even many people who knew the method to break through and had already suppressed their own cultivation to prevent their spirit crystals from being too condensed and hard to break through. But even so, this barrier still blocked more than 80% of spirit cultivators in Gang's spirit realm forever. This was also the reason why there were so few people at the Unity of Heaven realm. Ling Shiqi thought that his comprehension was very good. Although it was not as abnormal as Master Tudong, it was one of the best among the people he knew. This was not the most important thing. The important thing was that he had inadvertently touched a trace of the power of the law of heaven and earth before, which was far above the spiritual power of heaven and earth and the original power of heaven and earth. No matter how strong his spirit crystal was, he was not afraid. Because of this, Lin Yuanliang and the old man said that there was no pressure for Ling Shiqi to break through the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, it was true. At this moment, the spiritual power in Ling Shiqi's body had reached a state of complete saturation. He was preparing to break the spirit crystal first, and then absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth to transform into his own power. With a thought, a white tiger's shadow flashed behind him, and then turned into a breeze and disappeared into his dantian. Immediately, the breeze turned into several wind blades and instantly cut through his spirit crystal. Immediately after, several clear cracks appeared on his spirit crystal. As more and more cracks appeared, the spirit crystals suddenly shattered into countless fine powder. Ling Shiqi's face immediately turned pale. This was the most dangerous time to break through the unity of heaven and man realm. If he did not take advantage of this time to draw the spiritual power of heaven and earth into his body, his cultivation would be completely destroyed. Ling Shiqi patted his forehead, and a green mini Ling Shiqi came out. This was his primordial spirit. His primordial spirit left his body, and everywhere he saw, there were countless specks of light of different colors. The foundation of the unity of heaven and man realm would be determined at this moment. The more types and quantities of spiritual power of heaven and earth you could communicate with, the stronger your strength would be. The primordial spirit made a seal, and Ling Shiqi's whole body was shining with starlight. Star Atlas covered heaven and earth. Heavenly Cosmic Star Gang. In this mysterious starry universe, stars of different colors appeared again, and these stars all had a strong suction force, like a black hole, crazily absorbing all the spiritual power of heaven and earth. In the imperial capital, the unity of heaven and man realms suddenly looked at the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards in surprise. On the surface, there was nothing, but they could clearly feel that the spiritual power of heaven and earth here was raging. Many of them thought that there were masters fighting in the Dark Thunder Guards. There were also many masters of the unity of heaven and man realm in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards. They all ran to the Xingji Pavilion and raised their eyes. Occasionally, there was a trace of surprise in their eyes. This level of spiritual power of heaven and earth could not be attracted by anyone among them. It was clear that they had reached the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. If they remembered correctly, there were only Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei in the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm in the Xingji Pavilion, but both of them were in the Pinghui Prefecture. Did someone break through the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm from the early stage? They never thought that it was Ling Shiqi who broke through. There was a huge barrier between the gang's spirit realm and the unity of heaven and man realm. It was unknown how many geniuses could not step through this barrier in their lives. In their impression, Ling Shiqi's cultivation made rapid progress. Even if he broke through the unity of heaven and man realm, it would be at least a few years later. In the secret chamber, Ling Shiqi's spirit returned to his body, and then his body glowed with dazzling light. All kinds of lights were intertwined, and the 9 colors were blurred and dazzling. At the same time, in his star sea, a huge level 5 star gradually formed, and all the spiritual power in his body slowly transformed into the spiritual power of heaven and earth elements. Strangely, the star marks, black marks, and golden dragon patterns on his spiritual crystals suddenly appeared again. Under the purification of the spiritual power of heaven and earth elements, they were connected and integrated with each other. In the end, they formed a black dragon pattern. There were a few star marks flashing on the dragon pattern, which looked mysterious. The black dragon star pattern then flew to Ling Shiqi's spiritual star sea like a dragon in the 9th heaven, and then sank into his spirit. Ling Shiqi's spirit immediately underwent earth-shaking changes. His body expanded rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, he became the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child. The black dragon star pattern appeared on the forehead of the spirit. In an instant, the eyes of the spirit turned into a star eye and a golden eye, and a few black lines appeared in the corners of the eyes. This was no longer the spirit, but the divine soul that only the spirit caster of the Tianyuan realm could have. This was the divine soul that was born when the spirit cultivator merged his spiritual power with the power of heaven and earth. There was the will of heaven and earth in the spiritual power. Even if the physical body was destroyed, the spirit cultivator could survive alone by relying on the divine soul, and his strength would not be weakened too much. Ling Shiqi was able to condense a divine soul when he broke through to the unity of heaven and man realm, which he never expected. When Ling Shiqi's divine soul and spiritual energy reached a delicate balance, a terrifying spiritual pressure erupted from Ling Shiqi's body. The array in the secret room was instantly activated, but more than half of it was still destroyed. Ling Shiqi stood up and clenched his fist, and the spiritual power of heaven and earth within a radius of 10 li throbbed. Unity of Heaven and Man Realm. Chapter 717. Ling Shiqi had never felt so powerful before. He felt like he was wandering in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As long as he wanted, he could mobilize all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. And he could mobilize the spiritual energy of heaven and earth of any attribute. At this time, two 7th-level spiritual techniques appeared in the heavenly cycle star technique at the same time. They were Star's Fall and Star God Armor. Because Ling Shiqi's breakthrough to the realm of oneness of heaven and men was too big a commotion, even the other 3 general managers were alarmed. Others might not be able to see it, but they could see that Ling Shiqi was breaking through. He actually broke through. The 3 of them were surprised and surprised. Ling Shiqi was too young. At his age, it was already a rare genius to have the cultivation of spirit aperture realm. But he was already in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. This was not the most terrifying thing, but the speed of his progress. 2 years ago, when Ling Shiqi entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guard, he was only in the middle stage of spirit aperture realm. In just 2 years, he had cultivated to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. This was the most terrifying thing. In addition, Ling Shiqi's fighting power was also known to be abnormal. He killed a gang spirit realm expert in the middle stage of spirit aperture realm. Now that he was in the realm of oneness of heaven and men, how powerful would he be? Even Eunuch Gao and the other 2 general managers felt some pressure. Before, Ling Shiqi, as one of the 4 general managers, was criticized the most for his cultivation. Now that he had broken through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men, his strength was not much weaker than theirs. This also meant that Ling Shiqi was officially qualified to compete with them for power and profit. After Li Jueqing's death, they had divided a lot of power, which should have been inherited by Ling Shiqi. Based on their understanding of Ling Shiqi, he would definitely not be willing to control 4 states. Ling Shiqi naturally noticed a large number of masters gathered outside the secret room. He did not rush to study the spiritual techniques. Instead, he said, "Everyone, I was lucky to break through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. I still need some time to consolidate. Forgive me for not being able to welcome you." What? Lu Xingji broke through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. That's impossible. I remember that he had just reached the gang spirit realm when he came back from Shantai County more than a year ago. How could he break through so quickly? His talent is monstrous. It's not just talent. If one wants to break through to the unity of heaven and man realm, the most important thing is comprehension ability. This is what a true genius is. It's hard to imagine what level he will reach in the future. Maybe in 20 or 30 years, there will be another Sky Origin stage cultivator in the Dark Thunder Guards. Everyone was shocked when they heard Ling Shiqi's words. They couldn't help but start discussing among themselves. In order to avoid being disturbed, Ling Shiqi released all 8 ghost slaves to guard around the secret room, and he himself had very important things to do. That was to completely obliterate the system's consciousness. This time, during the process of breaking through to the union of heaven and man realm, he was baptized by the heaven and earth elemental spiritual energy and unexpectedly condensed his divine soul. He took advantage of this opportunity to manipulate his divine soul to enter the depths of his soul again. Ling Shiqi was confident that he would be able to completely wipe out the system's consciousness this time. From then on, he would have no more worries. When he was immersed in the depths of his soul, he was a little surprised. Because this time, the system's consciousness was not in a state of sleep. Instead, it was looking at Ling Shiqi with its arms crossed, as if it had known that Ling Shiqi would come. Ling Shiqi's divine soul raised his hand and set up a layer of flame-bounded domain. Then he began to speak. "Are you waiting for me?" "Yes." This time, the system's consciousness seemed to be very awake. It was not as mechanical or crazy as the previous 2 times. But the more the system's consciousness behaved like this, the more vigilant Ling Shiqi became. "What are you worried about? Are you afraid that I have some tricks up my sleeve?" The system's consciousness said with a smile, "Don't think too much. I'm no match for you." Isn't the purpose of your coming here to kill me? Congratulations, you're about to succeed. Leng Shiqi clenched his fist, and the shadow of the blood-soaked demon sword appeared. With his current strength, a short-lived divine epiphany was enough to kill the system's consciousness. He did not want to listen to the system's nonsense. It was a scourge, an invisible time bomb. No one knew when it would explode, so it had to be eliminated. However, just as he was about to strike, the system's consciousness said, "You did very well, much better than I did back then. You didn't rely on the system too much after you got it, so I didn't recover much of my strength. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been defeated so thoroughly. By the way, should I call you Leng Shiqi, Lu Xingji, or my next host?" Leng Shiqi's sword paused. What did the system's consciousness mean? That's right. In fact, I'm not the system's consciousness that you think I am. I'm the previous host of this system, so I can be considered your senior. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi's eyes widened. He had never thought of this situation. If the system's consciousness was not lying, then why did he become an extremely weak consciousness? Leng Shiqi knew how powerful the system was. He also relied on the system to achieve what he had today, so the previous host would not be too bad. How could he end up like this? A dying man speaks the truth. There are some things that I can tell you, the system's consciousness said solemnly. When I first got the system, I rose rapidly like you, but I never thought about the system's shortcomings. I always used the system to its fullest. When I reached the peak of that world, the system finally showed its fangs. The system was actually a vampire. It was sent to various small worlds to find suitable hosts, then quickly cultivated the host to become the strongest in the world. Then, it would devour the host, and in turn, devour the entire world. And we are just the system's tools and nourishment. Leng Shiqi frowned. What the system's consciousness said was beyond his understanding, but it also confirmed that his first reaction when he got the system was to be vigilant. There was no such thing as a free lunch. This reminded him of when he met Lin Ying in Shi City. He was possessed by an evil spirit and thought that he had obtained a great opportunity. Little did he know that if Leng Shiqi had not intervened, Lin Ying would have ended up as food for the evil spirit statue. In this way, Leng Shiqi and Lin Ying were essentially the same. Of course, this was based on the premise that the system's consciousness was not lying. The system's consciousness continued, "I know you don't believe me. I just want to tell you a piece of good news and a piece of bad news. The good news is that you did not rely too much on the system. You relied on your own abilities to come into contact with the laws of heaven and earth in this world. The bad news is that you think you're smart. After you found me and killed me for the first time, you obtained a portion of the system's authority, right? But other than that, you should have noticed that every time you exchange system coins, a wave of energy will enter your body. Is that right?" Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The system's consciousness was right. He had wanted to explore it in the past, but that wave of energy never appeared again after it entered his body. He had no idea where to start. Actually, that's the nourishment that the system needs. Now that you've obtained a portion of that energy, guess what will happen? The system's consciousness sneered. This was also his biggest advantage against the system. As long as he could comprehend the true laws of heaven and earth as soon as possible and use the system as little as possible, he might be able to strip the system away. The system's consciousness was shattered by Leng Shiqi's slash, and a large amount of black and white light flowed out, which was absorbed by Leng Shiqi. His soul returned to his spiritual space, and the illusion character that had been floating there suddenly bloomed with a strong five-colored brilliance, and finally turned into lines of text. This was the complete ancient technique 5-God flowing light technique. All the words were imprinted into Leng Shiqi's soul. With his current realm, he could cultivate two 7th-level techniques 5-God throne and dream-colored glass. The 5-God throne could summon an ancient phantom that could intimidate all living things. It was equivalent to a trapping array. Not only could it trap people, it could also suppress a portion of the enemy's strength. The dream-colored glass was an illusion technique, and it was a large-area illusion technique. As long as Leng Shiqi was willing to use the full strength of his soul, he could cause an entire city of people to fall into the illusion technique and sleep forever in the dream realm. However, a blood imprint appeared on his soul. This was the blood oath that Leng Shiqi had made when he obtained this technique in the illusory spirit's secret realm. He had to rebuild the divine illusion palace in his lifetime, or else the blood oath would break and his soul would be destroyed and he would not be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Leng Shiqi did not care too much about this blood oath. With his current strength and status, it was too easy to establish a force. He just needed to find an opportunity to build the divine illusion palace somewhere. Speaking of this, he immediately thought of Oziu. Since both of them had obtained the inheritance of the divine illusion palace, Oziu should have made a similar blood oath. If there was a chance in the future, he could give Oziu a large amount of resources to build another divine illusion palace. Then, Leng Shiqi simply studied the complete 5-god flowing light technique. This technique was an ancient technique. According to the current ranking, it should be between the 8th and 9th level. It was enough to cultivate all the way to the heavenly origin realm. What made Leng Shiqi feel a little strange was that in the past, whenever he broke through a large realm, the system would be upgraded. However, this time, there was no such notification. He immediately opened the system and looked at his information. Name, Leng Shiqi, Lu Xingji. Cultivation, middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm status. Peak bloodline, Dark Shadow Clan, Star Clan Management Authority, 100% system energy, 17% technique. Rank 8 Technique 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique Rank 8 Technique 16 Heaven Transformations Rank 8 Technique 1000 Illusion Sword Technique Ancient Technique 5 God Flowing Light Technique Supreme Technique Heavenly Cycle Star God Technique Special Technique Wild Demon Blood Beast Body Spiritual Technique, Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Purple Lightning Punishment All Rank 7 Spiritual Technique 5 God Throne Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Glazed Dream Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Falling Stars Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Star God Armor System Coins, 2790 He first saw that his cultivation was actually at the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm. This made him very surprised. He had clearly just broken through to the Unity of Heaven realm. How did he suddenly jump from the early stage to the middle stage? In fact, the realm of the Unity of Heaven realm was no longer divided into 9 levels like before. Instead, it was roughly divided into the early stage, the middle stage, the late stage, and the peak stage. There was no obvious barrier between these 4 small realms. It was mainly determined by the elemental spiritual energy of heaven and earth that you controlled. As long as you could mobilize enough spiritual energy of heaven and earth, there would naturally be a qualitative change and you would reach the next small realm. When Leng Shiqi broke through, he could already mobilize the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. He had directly reached the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm. Of course, this could only be said to be a small surprise for Leng Shiqi. He was most concerned about the 2 information of the system's authority and the system's energy. Now that he had 100% of the system's authority, it meant that he could freely control this mysterious system. The system's energy had also increased to 17%. This progress was equivalent to the progress of his assimilation by the system. If it reached 100%, then he would become the next consciousness of the system. In other words, this was also Leng Shiqi's death sentence. Chapter 719. Leng Shiqi definitely did not want to become the next consciousness of the system. Now he had 2 options. One was to understand the laws of heaven and earth as soon as possible so that he could strip away the system. In the future, he would also have to use the system as little as possible. The source of the system's energy was actually the system currency. As long as Leng Shiqi did not use resources to exchange for system currency, the system's energy would not increase and it would buy him more time. However, the path of cultivation was also a heaven-defying act. The road was rugged and he could not use the system forever. He could only use it as a last resort. Unknowingly, Leng Shiqi felt a lot of pressure in his heart. That pressure forced him not to slack off at all. He had to improve his strength at all times. After making up his mind, Leng Shiqi was still curious about the changes in the system after he had 100% authority. After all, there were some parts of the system that did not require system currency. Perhaps he could use them. He carefully looked at each of the subsidiary systems. First of all, the backpack system no longer had any grid or limit. It could be said that this was a backpack with unlimited space. The system map did not change much because he had already opened all the maps. Now it was more detailed and even the names of the places were written. All the functions of the pet system had been opened. As long as Leng Shiqi was willing to spend the system currency, he could cultivate the Goo King or the four-legged metal-swallowing beast to rank 6 or even rank 7 in a short time. However, when it came to the system currency, Leng Shiqi still decided to think about it again. The changes in the territory system were the least. Even if he had all the system authority, he was still the host. He still had to follow the requirements of the territory system and slowly upgrade the underworld. However, there were also some additional territory functions. For example, he could materialize the territory and place it in a certain place. This way, as long as the members of the underworld were nearby, they could directly teleport in. It was very convenient. There was also the setting of territory authority and so on. Leng Shiqi still had to slowly explore it. As for the shop system, it was the one that had changed the most. Now, the shop no longer had any products on display, nor did it have the ability to refresh. This was because Leng Shiqi could directly use system currency to exchange for any item in any world. As long as you had enough system currency, he could even become a god. Rather than calling it a lottery system, it would be more appropriate to call it the All Heavens Exchange System. While Leng Shiqi was surprised, he also felt that this system was too scary. At the mention of the Lucky Draw system, he opened the Lucky Draw interface. All the Lucky Draw options had been unlocked. There were Top Lottery, Super Lottery, and Divine Lottery. The system coins needed to be spent were 100,000, 1 million, and 10 million respectively. Leng Shiqi sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw this. The first time he had drawn an infinite skill point after obtaining the system, he had drawn an infinite skill point worth tens of millions of system coins. Without unlimited skill points, Leng Shiqi would never have achieved what he did today. Even if he did reach this point sooner or later, it would take a long time. Now that he thought about it, he was really lucky back then. He already had these subsidiary systems. Now that he had all the system permissions, there were different changes. Next, he would have to look at the others. For example, he didn't need to upgrade the system anymore. He could activate all kinds of subsidiary systems at will. Thinking of the equipment system, profession system, talent system, and so on that he had reluctantly abandoned, he could activate them at any time. However, Leng Shiqi didn't choose to activate any of the subsidiary systems after hesitating for a while. What was the purpose of activating the subsidiary systems? It was nothing more than to improve his strength. However, Leng Shiqi now had many ways to improve his strength. For example, he had new spiritual skills for many of the high-level techniques he had. Moreover, he didn't plan to use unlimited skill points for these high-level spiritual skills. He wanted to rely on his own ability to cultivate them. Although the consciousness of the system had been erased by him, the words it said before it died were still imprinted in Leng Shiqi's mind. That was to not rely too much on the system. He had killed the consciousness of the system this time. Next time, he might have to face the system directly. If he used the spiritual skills cultivated by the system to fight against the system, he definitely wouldn't be able to win. Cultivating these spiritual skills required time, and fusing them took even more time. In addition, he had just broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm, so he needed to consolidate his cultivation. In this way, he would be slowly improving his strength for a long time, so he didn't need to activate the subsidiary systems. Instead of directly obtaining power from the system, it was better to get something more specific. For example, the ability to teleport instantly like the Fate skill was actually more practical than the profession system. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi muttered, "This system, it seems like it's time to hide it." Therefore, he didn't care about the outside world's discussion and continued to cultivate in seclusion. Soon, the news of him breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm spread. Everyone who heard the news was amazed. They also began to admire Lei Qingjuan's foresight. To be able to go against the objections of the masses and choose such an outstanding chief steward, his foresight was quite unique. Moreover, Leng Shiqi did not disappoint everyone. However, in terms of cultivation progress, no one could surpass him in everyone's memories. Unknowingly, the name Lu Xingji became even more famous. This news naturally spread to the crown prince's palace. Lei Haoge, who was dealing with state affairs, immediately became gloomy. During his crown prince succession ceremony, he had forcefully forced Leng Shiqi to submit to him. In the end, they parted on bad terms. Lei Haoge let out a message for Leng Shiqi to go back and think about it. However, who would have thought that Leng Shiqi didn't take his words seriously and went into seclusion after returning? This seclusion lasted for half a year. This made Lei Haoge angry, but he couldn't just charge into the Dark Thunder Guards and make things difficult for the 4 chief stewards. He only wanted to wait for him to ascend the throne and completely take over the Dark Thunder Guards before dealing with Leng Shiqi. At this time, he received news that Leng Shiqi had broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. While he was shocked and angry, his heart couldn't help but thump. Lei Haoge's cultivation talent wasn't very good, but he still had the basic knowledge of cultivation. In Shantai Prefecture, he clearly remembered that Leng Shiqi was only at the spirit aperture realm. In just 2 years, he had reached the unity of heaven and man realm. Lei Haoge had never heard of such a monstrous cultivation speed. The more outstanding Leng Shiqi was, the more people would chase after him and the more the upper echelons of the Thunderfire dynasty would value him. If Lei Haoge wanted to touch him again, it would be extremely difficult. Lei Haoge sat there, his expression fluctuating. After a while, a cold ruthlessness flashed through his eyes as he said, "Hidei, go invite Chief Steward Hai and Chief Steward Shintu of the Dark Thunder Guards. Remember, don't let anyone find out." Chapter 720. While Leng Shiqi continued his seclusion, Xingji Pavilion encountered quite a bit of trouble. On this day, Deputy Manager Ren Yi was dealing with the large and small affairs of Xingji Pavilion when several other deputy managers and eunuchs hurriedly walked in with dissatisfaction on their faces. Seeing this, Ren Yi knew that something had happened and asked, "What happened?" He Feichen replied, "Ren Darren, not long ago, many of our brothers were sent back when they went to pick up missions. They said that the rules are different from before, but when we asked, they couldn't give us a reason. In short, they didn't give us any missions. Even the 2 deputy managers couldn't do it. They said that only Lu Darren could do it." Ren Yi was an old man who had been in the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters for several decades. From He Feichen's short words, he could tell that someone was clearly targeting them. The news of Leng Shiqi breaking through to unity of heaven and man realm had already spread. Generally speaking, after breaking through to this realm, it would take at least a year or so to consolidate, or else it would lead to an unstable foundation and affect one's future cultivation. Therefore, Leng Shiqi definitely couldn't come out of seclusion at this time. Others naturally knew this and wanted to use this time to cause trouble. And the only people who could target the 4 managers could only be the 4 managers. Ren Yi concluded that it was either Manager Hai or Manager Shintu who was secretly making a move. Ren Yi muttered, "Is the Great Commander at headquarters?" The Great Commander has always appeared and disappeared unpredictably. We don't know his whereabouts, so it's almost impossible to find the Great Commander. He Feichen shook his head. Then what about Manager Gao? Eunuch Gao was Leng Shiqi's Shizhuan. They were all the 4 managers, so needless to say, they had to be on the same boat. Now that they couldn't find the Great Commander, they could only ask Eunuch Gao for help. However, He Feichen suddenly sighed. News came from the palace yesterday. The humble prince ordered all the servants who had served the previous emperor to go to the imperial mausoleum to observe mourning for the previous emperor for 3 years. Eunuch Gao has already gone. Not good. Ren Yi realized that the situation wasn't good. The Grand Commander was not here. Eunuch Gao was ordered to observe the mourning period, and then there were people who made things difficult for Xingji court. All of these seemed to be driven by a mastermind. Just Manager Hai or Manager Shintu alone would definitely not be able to do this. the identity of the mastermind behind the scenes would only be higher. Missions were the foundation of the Dark Thunder Guards. Only by continuously completing missions would one be able to obtain large amounts of resources and merit points, and thus have a path to promotion. In the Dark Thunder Guards, except for those who were too old to be beaten, there were very few passive people. If they didn't have any missions, they couldn't just stay in Singji Pavilion forever. In the long run, their Singji Pavilion's reputation would be ruined. This matter was neither big nor small. In short, it was very difficult to deal with. Renyi rubbed the space between his eyebrows, feeling a headache coming on. Let's not alarm Lord Lu for now. Let the brothers finish the tasks at hand first. If there's nothing left, go into seclusion or spar. We can't be idle. Yes. He Fei-Chen lowered his head and said, but this is only a temporary measure. I'm worried that the other side will have follow-up plans. After all, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to defend against a stab in the dark. We can't just sit here and wait for death. How could I not know what you're saying? Relax, although us old fellows aren't as strong as before, the connections we've accumulated over the years are not few. I'll use other channels to find out who is targeting us. If there's no other way, I'll take on some private work so that Singji Pavilion won't be wasted. Renyi already had a plan in his mind. He turned to the other 3 vice managers and said, you must restrain your subordinates for now. Don't cause trouble and don't easily get into conflict with others. As long as Lord Lu comes out of seclusion, everything will be solved. Everyone agreed with Renyi's suggestion. Not letting them take on missions was only the first step against them. There would be more following, so it wasn't a big deal for them to endure it. When their lord comes out of seclusion, all problems would no longer exist. Actually, they didn't know when it started, but they already had this much confidence in Leng Shiqi. After discussing the countermeasures, everyone dispersed. Sure enough, something happened a few days later. An ordinary War Thunder Guard in Singji Pavilion was found to have abused his power for personal gain, embezzled huge sums of money, and was caught with the stolen goods. Without informing Renyi, he was directly sent to prison. At the same time, many negative news about Singji Pavilion spread rapidly, saying that they didn't want to make progress, were corrupt, and relied on the name of Leng Shiqi to be even more arrogant and domineering, and didn't put anyone in their eyes. There were also people who stood up and said that Leng Shiqi didn't kill Thousand Illusion Sword Elder at all, and that it was all deliberate. For a time, the reputation of Dark Thunder Guard Singji Pavilion in the imperial capital was extremely bad. Not only that, but there would always be some bad things happening every once in a while. The most serious thing was that several subordinates under Manager Hai and Manager Shintu went to the 4 counties under Leng Shiqi's supervision. And their purpose was to seize power. This was equivalent to breaking the roots of Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi's strongest subordinates were all concentrated in the imperial capital, and only Pinghui Prefecture had Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei in charge. Unfortunately, the other 3 counties were not so optimistic. In the case where Leng Shiqi couldn't appear, his supervision power was in jeopardy. During this time, Renyi was so busy that he seemed to have lost a lot of hair. At first, he thought it was a general manager who was making a move, but in the end, it was Manager Hai and Manager Shintu who were targeting them at the same time. Leng Shiqi was in seclusion, the commander was not here, and Eunuch Gao also went to the Imperial Mausoleum. Who could stop the 2 general managers from joining forces? At this time, all the deputy managers and internal supervisors of Singji Pavilion gathered in the meeting hall to discuss what to do. Renyi said with a bitter face, Manager Hai and Manager Shintu are pressuring us step by step. If we are really robbed of the right to supervise a few provinces and counties, then Singji Pavilion will lose its foundation. What should we do? They are going overboard. Aren't they afraid that the commander will blame them if he finds out? Sigh, if the matter is settled, the commander will at most blame them. What can he do to them? Then we can't sit still and wait for death. Otherwise, I will personally go down and definitely not give up the supervision power. One of the deputy managers said. No. Renyi rejected, as a deputy manager, if you personally seize power, then the headquarters will lose a lot of power. I'm afraid there will be even more chaos. If it really doesn't work, we can only ask Sir Lu to come out of seclusion. As long as Sir appears, at least the current situation can be stabilized. It still won't work. Sir has just broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. If he doesn't consolidate his cultivation, it will affect his life. This won't work, that won't work. Are we just going to wait for power to be seized? At that time, even if Sir Lu comes out of seclusion, only an empty shell of Xingji Pavilion will be left. Everyone instantly fell silent. Because they really didn't have any good ideas. They could only watch as they slowly died like a frog being boiled in warm water. Just as everyone was feeling anxious, a voice suddenly came in. To make you all so anxious, what happened in Xingji Pavilion? When everyone heard this voice, they were slightly stunned at first. But immediately, they were pleasantly surprised. They turned their heads at the same time and saw a young man wearing a black and red official robe standing in front of the door of the meeting hall. It was Ling Shiqi. Chapter 721. Sir. You've finally come out. Greetings, sir. When everyone saw Ling Shiqi, it was as if they had seen their savior. They were all ecstatic. Even the weakest among them was an eunuch. However, they had been targeted and troubled for the past few months. Now, Ling Shiqi's appearance had finally given them their greatest hope. Ling Shiqi smiled and sat in the empty seat in the center. He gestured for everyone to sit down. After sitting down, for some reason, everyone suddenly had a backbone. They were no longer as anxious as before. They keenly discovered that the reason was that Ling Shiqi exuded an indescribable aura. It seemed to be confidence, steadiness, and a little calmness. Even if something big happened, it was nothing in front of him. It was this kind of temperament that allowed everyone to calm down. In fact, it was indeed so. Ling Shiqi had a self-confidence that came from inside out. This confidence was not because he was arrogant, but because of his strength. It had been more than 3 months since he had broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. These days, he had been cultivating spiritual techniques and comprehending the laws of heaven and earth. Unexpectedly, the process was unusually smooth. Especially when he cultivated the heavenly cycle star god technique, the 5 god flowing light technique, and the 1000 illusion sword codex. It was as easy as water flowing through a canal. His comprehension was very high. Cultivating the spiritual techniques that were most suitable for him was really twice the result with half the effort. Now that he had succeeded in cultivating his spiritual technique, he had naturally merged it with his other spiritual techniques. Unfortunately, he had always been deducing it in his spiritual sea and had never really fought with anyone. He still didn't know exactly how powerful it was. In addition, he also had some understanding of the earth element, the 4 elements, and the power of yin and yang. Compared to spiritual techniques, these powers that involved the laws of heaven and earth were the strongest. Therefore, even Ling Shiqi himself didn't know how strong he was now. However, he believed that if he unleashed his full strength, it would be easy for him to kill a late-stage unity of heaven realm expert. His current combat strength was definitely comparable to a peak-stage unity of heaven realm expert, or even higher. It could also be said that cultivators below the sky origin stage were no longer a threat to the Ling Shiqi. For example, Li Juning, who had almost killed him in the past, if they were to fight again, Ling Shiqi could kill him in an instant. Ling Shiqi was full of confidence because of this powerful strength. He pacified everyone and said calmly, "Tell me, what happened while I was in seclusion?" Ren Yi immediately summarized everything in the shortest and most concise manner. "My lord, it's like this. Right now, other than Pinghui Prefecture, Tianshan Prefecture and the other 2 prefectures are in imminent danger." However, Ling Shiqi did not care about this. Instead, he asked, "You said that Manager Hai and Manager Shen to work together to seize my supervision authority?" "That's right. If my lord came out of seclusion a few months later, I'm afraid all the supervision authority would be gone." Who would have thought that Ling Shiqi would shake his head? That's not the case. You may not know this, but the Grand Commander has already ordered that internal strife between the four great stewards is forbidden during the year before the new emperor ascends the throne. Thus, the people behind the scenes might not be them. Moreover, I was in seclusion, and Master only went to the imperial tomb to observe mourning. We are not dead, so Manager Hai and the others did not need to be in such a hurry to seize power. Whether it was the Great Commander appearing, me coming out of seclusion, or Master returning, their actions of seizing power did not have much meaning. Perhaps you were under too much pressure and did not think of this. Ren Yi and the others immediately understood. Yes, yes, yes. My lord means that there is someone behind Manager Hai and Manager Shintu. That's right. Actually, I have already guessed who that person is. Ling Shiqi said leisurely. Who is it? Everyone asked at the same time. Ling Shiqi made a shushing gesture. I can't say. However, since I have already come out of seclusion early, you don't have to worry about this. Go and tell all the brothers that Xingji Pavilion will be back to normal in a few days. You have all been working hard these days. Have a good rest. This. Ren Yi and the others still hesitated. Even if Ling Shiqi came out of seclusion, in the face of such a serious predicament, he could not easily solve it with his own strength, right? However, since Ling Shiqi had already spoken, they could only do as he said. To be honest, they had been too tired these days. Even if their cultivations were high, they still felt physically and mentally exhausted. Then we will take our leave. Everyone left the meeting hall one by one. Right, my lord, you came out of seclusion early. Did you have any problems with your cultivation? Ren Yi asked before leaving. Ling Shiqi smiled gently. It's fine. There were two reasons why he came out of seclusion early. The first was that Lei Haoga's ascension ceremony was about to arrive. As one of the four chiefs, he had to attend. The second reason was that Delta Origi had told him roughly what had happened in Xingji Pavilion through the Netherlamp illusion. He naturally could not watch as he lost the right to supervise, so he came out of seclusion early. Fortunately, his cultivation base was very deep. His realm of unity of heaven and man was already very stable. Moreover, his cultivation of spiritual techniques had almost reached the point of saturation. As for the comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth, that was not something that could be done overnight. He could not rush it. When everyone left, Ling Shiqi's eyes revealed an undisguised murderous intent. He knew best who was playing tricks behind the scenes. In the imperial capital, the only one who had a grudge against him was Lei Haoga. If it was not him, who else could it be? However, Ling Shiqi did not expect Lei Haoga to have such great ability to persuade Manager Hai and Manager Shintu to work together against Xingji Pavilion. Of these two, one was very experienced, while the other had a military background. He did not know what benefits Lei Haoga had promised to persuade them. Furthermore, Eunuch Gao had been temporarily ordered to observe mourning for 3 years in the imperial mausoleum. It could be seen that this was also arranged by Lei Haoga. It seemed that he was not that useless. It was a pity that Lei Haoga had used his rare shrewdness to deal with Ling Shiqi. He did not know that he had brought a fatal disaster upon himself. That's right. Ling Shiqi had already decided to kill the crown prince, Lei Haoga, the future emperor of the Thunderfire dynasty. If others do not offend me, I will not offend them. If others offend me, I will kill them. In any case, Lei Haoga had not ascended the throne yet and did not have many experts protecting him. As for whether his death would affect the Thunderfire dynasty, that was not something Ling Shiqi needed to consider. The only thing that puzzled Ling Shiqi was that Manager Hai and Manager Shintu should have known that what they were doing did not have much meaning. Why did they still do it? I underestimated him, but it doesn't matter. There is no need to feel sorry for a dead person, Ling Shiqi muttered to himself, then disappeared from the meeting hall. Chapter 722. In the Crown Prince's residence, Hidei was standing in front of Lei Haoga and talking about Xingji Pavilion. Your Highness, the authority to supervise Tianshan County is about to be taken away by Supervisor Hai. It won't be long before Lu Xingji becomes a loner. Lei Haoge was full of joy as he said disdainfully, a mere Lu Xingji dares to be impudent in front of me. He should know how powerful I am and the importance of power. As long as Ben Gong is willing, even Manager Hai and Manager Shintu would have to be docile and obedient, let alone a useless manager like him. That's true. The young eunuch serving tea beside him flattered, Your Highness the Crown Prince is immeasurably virtuous. All the lands in the world belong to you. What for supervisors? When Your Highness becomes the Emperor, won't their lives be in your hands? Ha 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 ha, well said, well said. Lei Haoge immediately laughed wildly. He Dai frowned secretly. It had been more than 10 months since Lei Haoge became the crown prince. There was not much time left until the 1-year deadline. Seeing that he was about to become the emperor and that there were many people sucking up to him, Lei Haoge became complacent. In particular, the series of events against Leng Shiqi were all secretly pushed by Lei Haoge. Everything was going as he expected, making him feel like the world was under his control. However, He Dai was not happy at all, because he had noticed that Lei Haoge was changing just as Leng Shiqi had said. He had become arrogant, narrow-minded, and even suspicious. Even He Dai, an old man who had followed Lei Haoge for many years, did not trust him as much as before. For half a year, Lei Haoge wanted to achieve something, but he also listened to the slanderous words of others and fiddled around. Not only did he not make any contributions, but he also made the imperial capital a mess and caused a lot of trouble. However, more people benefited from this, so there was not much negative news about him that reached the humble prince's ears. However, He Dai always wondered what Lei Haoge would become when he really ascended to the throne. Would the Thunderfire dynasty really be fine in his hands? He Dai even thought that it would be better to let the clumsy prince take the reins and let Lei Haoge be a puppet emperor. While He Dai was thinking this worriedly, Lei Haoge was chatting happily with the young eunuch. After a long while, he finally said, "Oh, He Dai, you're still here. Go back to your work." This servant obeys. He Dai bowed his head, but his heart felt even more depressed. Then, Lei Haoge clapped his hands, and 2 rows of well-dressed young girls swam out of the room. They were all purple and had beautiful figures. The young eunuch yelled, "Start the dance and play the music." He Dai, who had just walked away, paused for 2 breaths. In the end, he sighed and continued walking. He had told Lei Haoge many times that he should not indulge in wine, women, and dancing all day long. If the humble king knew about it, it might affect his position as the emperor. At first, Lei Haoge still listened to him, but now he was just putting on an act. He Dai shook his head as he walked. He thought back to when he was in Shantai County. Lei Haoge was not very smart, but at least he was very motivated. His cultivation talent was not good, but he did not stop cultivating every day. He was not shrewd enough, so he used his sincerity to rope in forces. However, the current Lei Haoge was like a different person. He Dai did not dare to recognize him. Inside the room, Lei Haoge was enjoying the service and singing of the maids with an intoxicated expression. However, all of a sudden, an invisible and strange force pressed down from all directions. The terrifying pressure instantly caused all the dancers to explode into clouds of blood mist. Before Lei Haoge could react, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in front of his chest. It condensed into a golden dragon the size of a human to protect him. However, this golden dragon only lasted for an instant before it was crushed. However, it was at this moment that a total of 10 experts of the unity of heaven and man realm descended from the sky. Assassins. Protect the crown prince. Quick, the 10 experts were the bodyguards responsible for protecting Lei Haoge. They usually did not reveal themselves, but in fact, they were all hiding to protect him in the dark. After all, Lei Haoge was the future emperor. How could he not have a true expert protecting him? These 10 people successively used their methods to protect Lei Haoge. However, what shocked them was that they could not communicate with the elemental spiritual power of heaven and earth at this moment. As an expert of the unity of heaven and man realm, what they were most proud of was using the elemental spiritual power of heaven and earth. However, There was no elemental spiritual power of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. It was as if the heaven and earth had been isolated. But how was this possible? While everyone was in shock, they saw a black ball the size of a thumb appear in the middle of them. Suddenly, heaven and earth twisted and distorted the void. Everything in the room was constantly being pulled and twisted. Finally, they were sucked into the small black ball. Including everything, including the 10 experts of the unity of heaven and man realm, including Lei Hauga. In the end, not even a drop of blood was left. Hidei, who had just walked not far, suddenly felt a feeling that made his heart palpitate. He also heard the shouting. When he hurriedly turned around, he saw Lei Hauga and all the other experts of the unity of heaven and man realm being twisted into pieces. Boom! Hidei's brain seemed to be thrown into a bomb, which made him almost lose consciousness in an instant. His master, the current crown prince, Lei Hauga, who would ascend the throne and become the emperor in a month, was dead. Under the protection of 10 experts of the unity of heaven and man realm, he died in the blink of an eye. Hidei was frightened and horrified at the same time. He felt even more incredible. He himself was at the late stage of Gang's spirit realm and was also preparing to break through the unity of heaven and man realm. Therefore, he had also touched the elemental spiritual power of heaven and earth. However, he did not even notice the fluctuation of the elemental spiritual power of heaven and earth just now. However, he saw the tragic death of Lei Hauga and all the other experts with his own eyes. This meant that the 10 experts of the unity of heaven and man realm were killed before they could make a move. What was more terrible was that Hidei did not even feel the fluctuation of the spiritual power. What kind of realm could kill so many experts of the unity of heaven and man realm without using any spiritual power? He was afraid that Tianyuan realm might not be able to do it. The most important thing was that Lei Hauga was dead. The crown prince was killed in the crown prince mansion. This was simply a big joke. Although Hidei was very disappointed with Lei Hauga, he still treated Lei Hauga as his own child in his heart. He witnessed the tragic death of Lei Hauga and suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. The huge mental impact made Hidei gasp violently for a few times. His eyes were gray and full of despair. At this time, a large number of spirit cultivators rushed over, among which there were many experts. However, when they ran over, they only saw an empty area and Hidei, who was lying on the ground and lost his soul. These people were very confused. Where was the crown prince? Chapter 723. Yuna-ki, we heard there was an assassin. Where is the crown prince? There is no trace of the assassin. Where is the crown prince's palace? They were all confused. Even if there was an assassin, he couldn't have killed the crown prince without making a sound. Besides, they didn't sense any spiritual power fluctuation. That meant there was no fight. Where did the crown prince go? How did his palace disappear? Puff! Hidei was so anxious that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He said weakly, the crown prince was assassinated. He was assassinated. Hearing that, the others were stunned. They couldn't believe it. They looked at each other and felt that Hidei was joking. Where was this place? It was the royal capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty. It was the crown prince's palace. Not to mention the guards, the crown prince must have more powerful guards around him. Even a Sky Origin stage cultivator would not be able to kill the crown prince quietly. Even a Sky Origin stage cultivator wouldn't have much hope. There were many Sky Origin stage cultivators in the royal capital. If a Sky Origin stage cultivator came to assassinate the crown prince, he wouldn't be able to get away. That was why they all believed the crown prince was assassinated. However, the crown prince and his palace had disappeared. That meant things weren't as simple as they seemed. Just as everyone was in a daze, 3 figures suddenly appeared in the sky above everyone. It was a Sky Origin stage cultivator. The appearance of these 3 people made everyone realize that the situation seemed to be really serious. Not only that, but there were also 8 or 9 figures standing in the void in succession. Each of them had a grave expression on their faces. The guards were all stunned. They couldn't believe they saw over a dozen Sky Origin stage cultivators at the same time. Normally, they wouldn't see so many powerful cultivators in their entire lives. It was a feast for their eyes. However, there were so many Sky Origin stage cultivators in the Crown Prince's palace. Something big must have happened. Did something happen to the Crown Prince? If that was the case, all of them standing here would not be able to escape punishment. They might even be dragged away to be beheaded. The Sky Origin stage cultivators in the sky didn't care about them. Some of them closed their eyes as if they were sensing something. Some of them frowned. Some of them looked gloomy. One of them said, "You all felt it, right? It is indeed the power of the laws of heaven and earth, the power of the laws of earth. It seems to be the law of gravity. What a desirable power. I didn't expect a Tongxian realm expert to personally come to the imperial capital." The Tongxian stage was a stage above the Tianyuan stage. Such experts were rare in the world. Every single one of them was an expert who could control the laws of heaven and earth. Their words were law, and they could move mountains and overturn seas with a single thought. That's strange. That person from Dynasty wasn't alarmed at all. It's clear that the person who attacked is on par with that person. What's even stranger is why he attacked Lei Haoge. He's just a useless ruler. That's true. There's something strange about this. It's just the death of a crown prince. The important thing is to find out who did it. It doesn't matter if Lei Haoge dies or not. We can't lose face. That person can't have gone far. I suggest that we activate the Great Thunder Flame formation. Even if he's a Tongxian realm martial artist, he has to stay in the imperial capital. This is not something we can decide. While these Tianyuan realm experts were talking, a man in a golden robe arrived. He was the clumsy ruler. He looked at the empty crown prince residence and had an ominous premonition. He asked, "I was in the dragon vein preparing for Lei Haoge's ascension. What happened just now? Where is the crown prince?" "He's dead," a Tianyuan realm expert said calmly. He sounded like a stray dog that had died on the street. The clumsy ruler's eyes suddenly turned golden. He glanced around the crown prince residence and said, "There's the aura of the law of heaven and earth. Could it be a Tongxian realm expert?" A Tongxian realm expert appeared in the imperial capital and killed Lei Haoge. This was a great threat to the Thunderblaze dynasty. If this Tongxian realm expert was crazy enough to attack the imperial capital, the entire imperial capital would be destroyed. However, the clumsy ruler couldn't figure it out. There were detection arrays set up around the imperial capital. Any aura of a Tianyuan realm expert or above would be detected. Even if the arrays were evaded, there were still Tongxian realm experts from the Thunderblaze dynasty hiding in the imperial capital. If it was really a Tongxian realm expert, it was impossible for them not to be detected. What the hell is going on? Your Highness, should we activate the heaven-destroying Thunderblaze formation? Don't act rashly. If we push that guy too far, even if we kill him, the imperial capital will suffer a great loss. Let me go and ask Master Chow to come out first. Now, you guys are all scattered around the imperial capital. We can't let anything happen to you, the clumsy ruler said. We understand. What they said was blocked, so the people below couldn't hear them. The dozen Tianyuan realm experts flashed and disappeared. The clumsy ruler looked at the people below and asked, "Has the crown prince made any enemies recently?" The people looked at each other. They all knew Lei Haoge had caused a lot of trouble and some people must be dissatisfied with him. However, they wouldn't go so far as to assassinate the crown prince. Therefore, no one said anything. The clumsy ruler suddenly snorted. It was as if the power of heaven had descended. Under the gaze of his golden eyes, everyone felt chills down their spines. They were all frightened. Your Highness, I only know that the crown prince doesn't get along well with some generals. I heard that the crown prince has some conflicts with the heavenly treasure chamber of commerce. The Crown Prince has been picking on Steward Liu of the Dark Thunder Guards. The Crown Prince has asked for a lot of dancers in the past 2 months. They are all top prostitutes in the brothels. That is why he is in trouble. The more they talked, the more excited they became. It seemed this was a good chance for them to atone for their sins. They told the people about all the ugly things Lei Haoge had done recently. The clumsy ruler's face turned darker and darker. He didn't know Lei Haoge had done so many stupid things. He had offended all the powerful forces and noble families in the imperial capital. Although it wasn't a big deal, it was enough to show how arrogant Lei Haoge was in private. Was such a man really fit to be the crown prince? Even if Lei Haoge didn't die today, the clumsy ruler would have to reconsider. In the end, the clumsy ruler waved his sleeve and gave an order: "You all go to the heavenly prison to receive your punishment. If you don't obey, all your relatives will be killed." After that, he disappeared, leaving the people behind with gloomy faces. Leng Shiqi, who had assassinated Lei Haoge and was mistaken as a Tongxian realm cultivator, had already returned to the Xingji pavilion. He was holding his chest in pain. There was blood on the corner of his mouth. With my current cultivation, it is indeed a bit difficult for me to use the law of gravity. Chapter 724. Leng Shiqi had killed Lei Haoge and 10 oneness of heaven and man experts within 2 breaths. He had not used any spiritual technique, but the power of the laws of heaven and earth. To be more precise, it was the law of gravity. His greatest gain during this period of seclusion was not breaking through to the oneness of heaven and man realm, nor was it cultivating more level 7 spiritual techniques. It was that he had a preliminary grasp of the law of gravity and the law of earth. The law of gravity contained gravity and anti-gravity. Leng Shiqi had used the extreme anti-gravity technique to kill Lei Haoge and the others, the black hole space. In terms of the law of earth, he had comprehended the Qian Kuan earth traversal technique, which allowed him to travel 100 miles in an instant. It was a secret technique that was above all movement techniques. However, Leng Shiqi had only just begun to comprehend it. Moreover, with his current cultivation, he could not activate too much of the power of the laws of heaven and earth. Otherwise, he would suffer a certain backlash. Not long ago, when he assassinated Lei Haoge, he could only force himself to his limit in order to not leave anyone alive, which caused him to suffer some internal injuries. However, Leng Shiqi was even more aware of his current strength. The 10 oneness of heaven and man experts were all in the middle and late stages of the oneness of heaven and man realm. With this kind of strength, it would be easy for them to destroy a first-rate sect. They could even threaten the top sections. However, such a powerful force had been killed by Leng Shiqi in one move. It could be said that Leng Shiqi's current limit of strength was close to that of a sky origin expert. Leng Shiqi looked at his palm, then clenched it tightly. The feeling of holding a powerful force fascinated him. Today, he had also clearly felt the benefits of strength. If he was just an ordinary oneness of heaven and man realm, there was nothing he could do against Lei Haoge's suppression. He could either bow and submit to him, or wait for him to take revenge after he ascended the throne. Either way, it was extremely disadvantageous for Leng Shiqi. Now that he had used his strength to directly kill Lei Haoge, the mastermind behind the scenes, all the difficulties would naturally be solved. Even though Leng Shiqi could not guess why Manager Hai and Manager Shintu were persuaded by Lei Haoge, it was most likely because Lei Haoge had promised them various benefits after ascending the throne. But now that Lei Haoge was dead, who was going to give them benefits? As such, Manager Hai and Manager Shintu would have to reconsider if they wanted to continue targeting Leng Shiqi. As the intelligence agency of the Thunderfire dynasty, the Dark Lightning Guards were the first to receive news of Lei Haoge's death. Everyone who heard about it was so shocked that their jaws dropped. The Crown Prince was killed in the Crown Prince's residence. This was too absurd and too crazy. When Manager Hai and Manager Shintu found out about this, they were also in disbelief. Then, they quickly met up. Manager Hai said with a worried expression, "Shintu, Lei Haoge is dead. What should we do?" Shintuzhen clasped his hands in front of his chest and said without turning his head, Lu Xingji's troubles are not small now. Let's see how he cleans up the mess. Alas. General Manager Hai sighed. The Grand Commander wants to nurture Lu Xingji, but he wants us to be the bad guys. Originally, we only wanted to use Lei Haoge's identity and power to suppress Lu Xingji. If Lu Xingji came out of seclusion, he would be able to guess that Lei Haoge was the one who ordered us to do this. Even if he wanted to retaliate, he would find trouble with Lei Haoge. Now that Lei Haoge is dead, with Lu Xingji's temper, he will definitely use forceful methods to take revenge on us. Lu Xingji's breakthrough to the unity of heaven and man realm caused quite a commotion. I estimate that he is at least at the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. In the Dark Lightning Guards, other than you and me, there aren't many who can suppress him. Shentuzhen also felt that it was a little troublesome. However, they were not too concerned about Lei Haoge's death. Logically speaking, the Crown Prince's death was a huge matter. However, in their hearts and the eyes of the Sky Yuan experts, it did not seem to be a big deal. In fact, not having a Crown Prince, or rather, not having an Emperor, was the best outcome for them. The Dark Lightning Guards were currently in a situation where no one was in charge. The Grand Commander was also not often in the imperial capital. Manager Hai and the other managers could be said to be extremely powerful. Lei Haoge's death had indeed shocked them. However, they were even more surprised than shocked. Furthermore, the Emperor botched governance did not order them to investigate the Crown Prince's assassin. Since that was the case, they naturally did not care about the matter and just let it go. The Emperor botched governance did not order the Dark Lightning Guards to interfere because he thought the assassin was a Tongxian expert. The Dark Lightning Guard's highest cultivation level was Heavenly Venerable He Yen. However, even he did not have the qualifications to investigate a Tongxian expert. If they really used the Dark Lightning Guards, it would cause too much of a commotion and alert the enemy. While the two of them were talking, an extremely crazy idea suddenly appeared in Manager Hai's mind. He thought to himself, could Lei Haoge have been killed by Lu Xingji? However, he immediately discarded this unrealistic idea. He did not even say it out loud. He knew that if he said it out loud, Shentuzhen would only laugh at him. His Highness the Crown Prince is dead, yet the two managers are still so safe. It is truly admirable. At this moment, Leng Shiqi's voice came from outside. Manager Hai and Manager Shentu looked at each other. He came so fast. In their minds, Leng Shiqi should still be in closed-door training at this time. Creak. Leng Shiqi pushed the door open and entered without hesitation. However, the Dark Lightning Guards guarding the door stood there motionless like wooden chickens. Manager Hai and Manager Shentu were slightly shocked. At a glance, they could see that the guards at the door had fallen into the illusion. However, those guards were all experts of Gang's spirit realm. They did not even have time to react before they fell into the illusion. It could be seen that Leng Shiqi's attainments in illusion were extremely high now. At the same time, they also understood that Leng Shiqi came here today to demonstrate his power. Shentuzhen sneered in his heart, I want to see how much power you can play. Before the two of them had time to speak, Leng Shiqi raised one hand high and opened his 5 fingers. The sky suddenly changed, and the spiritual power of heaven and earth became extremely violent. In an instant, 5 divine shadows of hundreds of feet high descended. The divine power descended and suppressed the mortal world. 5 divine throne. Under the pressure of the divine power, Manager Hai and Manager Shentu felt as if a mountain was pressing down on them. Manager Hai formed a seal with both hands, and the green light around him rushed into the sky. The shadow of a green bird appeared behind him. Endless primordial spirit power surged out. There was a strange rhythm that made Leng Shiqi's 5 divine throne shake. Shentuzhen roared to the sky like a divine beast. He punched out, and the terrifying fist power shook the void as if it was the end of the world. He shattered 3 divine shadows with one punch. The two of them almost broke Leng Shiqi's 5 divine throne when they joined forces. However, Leng Shiqi did not attack again. Instead, he stood quietly in place, because he had achieved his goal. Manager Hai and Shintuzhen both looked deeply at Leng Shiqi. A person who had just broken through had directly skipped the initial stage and reached the middle stage of unity of heaven and man realm. That was not all. The power that Leng Shiqi erupted was already close to Manager Hai's level. He had to go all out to resist it. What kind of terrifying power was this? What was even more terrifying was how long Leng Shiqi had been cultivating for. Manager Hai remembered clearly that when Leng Shiqi had just arrived at the imperial capital, he had made a bet with Eunuch Gao. In the end, he had lost to one of Eunuch Gao's guards. At that time, Leng Shiqi was only at the spirit aperture realm. In a short 2 years, the person in front of him had already gained the qualifications to speak with them as equals. Manager Hai flipped his hand, and a stone chair rose from the ground. Sit. Chapter 725. Leng Shiqi smiled lightly. He knew that he finally had the qualifications to speak directly to the 4 directors. He sat down on the stone chair. There was nowhere else to sit because everything around him had been destroyed by the aftermath of their fight. After Leng Shiqi sat down, he went straight to the point. Director Hai, Director Shintu, as soon as I came out of seclusion, I found that the Xingji Pavilion has caused quite a bit of trouble. Even the 4 provinces under my command are in turmoil. Do the 2 directors not need to explain? If Leng Shiqi dared to say such things in front of them in the past, he would at least be seriously injured. However, it was different now. Director Hai stroked his long beard and looked amiable. I'm sure Director Liu has already guessed the person who really wants to deal with you. The 2 of us are only following orders. After all, the Dark Thunder Guards are still the Dark Thunder Guards of the Imperial Court. He pushed all the blame onto Lei Haoge with one sentence. After all, he was speaking the truth. Shintuzhen even nodded his head in a serious manner. Pushing all the blame onto a dead person. Do you think I can go to the underworld to settle the score with Lei Haoge? The 2 of you, my Xingji Pavilion is very chaotic right now. I came here today for no other reason than to demand an explanation. As Leng Shiqi spoke, a glass-like spiritual sword appeared in his hand. The moment this sword appeared, it caused the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to vibrate. Leng Shiqi sat on the stone chair, but he felt like he was one with heaven and earth. Level 8 Earth Weapon, 1000 Illusion Dao Sword. Shock flashed through the eyes of Director Hai and Shintuzhen. Even they did not have a level 8 Earth Weapon. This was something they yearned for even in their dreams. Just now, they had experienced Leng Shiqi's current strength. He was definitely not weaker than them. Adding the 1000 Illusion Dao Sword, he had even slightly surpassed them. They smiled bitterly in their hearts. Actually, they had thought of suppressing Leng Shiqi in the past. Because once Leng Shiqi grew up and joined forces with Eunuch Gao, they would have half of the Dark Thunder Guard's authority. This was not a good thing for them. However, after Lei Qingjuan's death, they knew that the Grand Commander would not allow them to fight among themselves. When Leng Shiqi went into seclusion to break through, they gradually gave up on this idea. In truth, all of this had been arranged by Grand Commander Heavenly Venerable Black Flame. Celestial Lord He Yen knew that Leng Shiqi had great potential, but he was afraid that if his mentality and strength were not equal, he would become arrogant and condescending. That kind of person was only suitable to be a general who charged and broke through enemy lines, not a commander. Thus, when Heavenly Sage He Yen learned that Leng Shiqi had a grudge with Lei Haoge, he planned to use this matter to temper Leng Shiqi's state of mind. But no one expected that Lei Haoge would suddenly die, and Leng Shiqi's strength would become so terrifying. Now, other than Empyrean Black Flame personally taking action, it was likely that no one could suppress him. Thus, Manager Hai and Shintuzhen were in a difficult position. Of course, they were not afraid of Leng Shiqi. If they continued to cause trouble, it would only get worse, and in the end, it would be difficult to resolve. However, it was impossible for them to lower their heads like this. Otherwise, where would they put their faces? Manager Hai's eyes flashed as he said, Manager Gao is not here, and you still dare to act like this? Manager Hai, I have lived until now and have never relied on anyone. I only believe in one thing, and that is that strength is respected. Leng Shiqi stroked the blade of the Thousand Illusion Dao sword, and the blade immediately hummed. Then, there seemed to be a sword hum in the sky. Seeing that Leng Shiqi was still so strong, Shentuzhen's heart burned with anger. Young man, we acknowledge your strength, but in this world, strength is not everything. Especially in a faction, you need to know how to network. Otherwise, sooner or later, you will not have a good ending. Leng Shiqi did not care about the hidden threat in Shentuzhen's words. Perhaps. If the two of you do not have an explanation today, I would like to test how strong I am. He really had some fighting spirit. Experts like Manager Hai and Shentuzhen were not comparable to other Unity of Heaven realms. They could be said to be between Unity of Heaven and Man and Heavenly Origin realms. Fighting with such experts was truly satisfying. The three of them fell silent. The atmosphere had already frozen to a freezing point, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was secretly surging. Now, all that was needed was a fuse, and they would really fight. Enough. Suddenly, a ball of black flames appeared above the three of them. Soon after, the black flames dissipated, revealing Empyrean Black Flame's face. Greetings, Grand Commander. The three of them stood up and said at the same time. Empyrean Black Flame looked at Leng Shiqi a few more times before saying, the three of you, Grand Managers, are at daggers drawn here. What are you doing? Lu Xingji, I already know about the Xingji Pavilion. Shentuzhen, the two of you will each give Lu Xingji the authority to supervise a prefecture. Right and wrong will be written off. If anyone still wants to scheme against each other, don't blame this Empyrean for not caring about my reputation. His Highness the Crown Prince died in an accident. All of you will follow me into the palace to discuss important matters. Manager Hai and Shentuzhen felt bitter. This matter was clearly the Grand Commander's idea, but in the end, they had to share the authority. However, this meant that the Grand Commander also acknowledged Leng Shiqi's strength, and he was qualified to have the authority to supervise 6 prefectures. Leng Shiqi secretly smiled. He had come on this trip with such a strong performance. He had originally planned to fish for some benefits, but now, he had obtained 2 prefectures, which exceeded his expectations. Thus, the three of them cupped their fists together and said, this lowly one obeys. Soon, the three of them followed Empyrean Black Flame to the palace's main hall. At this time, the highest level of the Thunderflame dynasty was basically all here. In this group of people, some were happy, while others were sad. Many of them had flattered Lei Haoge for a long time and had done many ridiculous things for him. They had originally planned to please the future emperor, which was of course a happy occasion. However, who knew that Lei Haoge would suddenly die before ascending the throne? There were also some people who had long disliked Lei Haoge. They might have been eliminated by Lei Haoge in the future. Now that Lei Haoge was dead, everything was better. When everyone had arrived, the humble prince first asked Empyrean Black Flame, I heard that the previous 4 managers, Li Juecheng, died very strangely. No one knew why the humble prince suddenly cared about Li Juecheng, who had died a year ago. Empyrean Black Flame also said thoughtfully, that's right. With Li Juecheng's strength, it's impossible for him to die in the hands of someone in the unity of heaven and man realms so easily. At that time, I captured a trace of the power of the earth at the scene, so it's possible that it was done by someone in the heavenly origin realm who cultivated the earth element technique. And it's at the peak of the heavenly origin realm. Unfortunately, we couldn't find any clues later, so we could only leave it as it is. However, the humble prince showed an expression that said, what I'm going to say next must not be leaked. I speculate that the person who killed Li Juecheng and the crown prince may be the same person. That person must be someone in the metaphysic realm. Chapter 726. When the 3 words, Tongxian realm, fell into the ears of the crowd, it was no doubt as shocking as a sudden clap of thunder. It was the same for those civil officials in the hall who didn't have much cultivation base. They were all in high positions, and they knew some secrets that ordinary people didn't know. The Sky Origin realm was not the end of cultivation. There was an even higher realm that controlled the laws of heaven and earth, known as the Heaven and Earth Profound Realm. It was also known as the Tongxian Realm. There were very few Sky Origin Stage cultivators in the world. One Sky Origin Stage cultivator was enough to support a top-tier sect. There were only about 50 top sects in the world, and the difference between the top sects was huge. The Thousand Illusions Sword sect was at the bottom, with only the Thousand Illusions Sword sovereign supporting it. The Mountain Sea sect had 2 or 3 Sky Origin Realm experts, which was the norm. The Blood Robe Pavilion, Imperial Beast House, and Blood Beast sect all had several Sky Origin Realm experts and were considered to be at the front. The top sects were at the top 5 sections. For example, the 10,000 Laws Mysterious sect had 9 Sky Origin Realm experts. The Yin and Yang Halls, the 3 Great Empires, and the 4 Saint Spirit Realms were all transcendent powers with more than 10 Sky Origin Realm experts. The Thunderfire Dynasty was a colossus, and their Sky Origin Realm experts were mainly concentrated in the Imperial Consecration Hall and the military. They had more than 30 Sky Origin Realm experts, which was terrifying. Including the sects ranked on the world's sect ranking and the lone cultivators, there were only a few hundred Heavenly Origin Stage cultivators on the entire Falling Star continent. The reason why the Thunderfire Dynasty was called a transcendent power was not only because they had Sky Origin Realm experts, but also because they had Tongxian experts. The Tongxian realm was almost unknown to ordinary people. More than 70% of the cultivators in the world did not even know about this realm. This was because this realm was too far away, and those who had this level of cultivation could be counted with one's fingers. There were only 7 known Tongxian realm experts in the world. They were from the 3 Great Empires and the 4 Saint Spirit realms respectively. As for the Yin and Yang halls, they were too mysterious. No one knew how many Tongxian realm experts they had. Thus, when the Shoddy Prince mentioned that a Tongxian realm expert might have come to the capital and killed the 4 great chief stewards and the crown prince, the shock was too great. When Leng Shiqi heard this, a look of shock appeared on his face, but he was laughing in his heart. Someone actually mistook him for a Tongxian realm expert. This way, no matter how they investigated, it would be impossible for them to trace it back to him. In fact, in terms of the laws of heaven and earth, Leng Shiqi did indeed have the qualifications to reach the Tongxian realm. It could also be said that he had already paved the path to the Tongxian realm for himself. As long as he didn't die prematurely, it was almost certain that he would break through to the Sky Origin stage. It was even possible for him to reach the Sky Origin stage. While everyone was still immersed in shock, Heavenly Venerable Black Flames was puzzled. There is indeed such a possibility, but why would that mysterious mystic comprehending realm cultivator want to kill Li Juecheng and His Highness the Crown Prince? When he killed Li Juecheng, the Crown Prince was not yet the Crown Prince. Could it be that Li Juecheng and the Crown Prince have something in common? He immediately hit the nail on the head. It was impossible to kill someone for no reason. There must be a reason. If Li Juecheng and the Crown Prince were both killed by the same person, it meant that the two of them had something in common. For example, having a common enemy. Those who could stand in the main hall were all smart people. They quickly thought of this point. Leng Shiqi did not panic. He was indeed worried about the Crown Prince and Li Juecheng, but he believed that others would not suspect him. First of all, Li Juecheng had dealt with Leng Shiqi secretly. No one knew about it except for Leng Shiqi and the Li clan. Now that the Li clan had been destroyed, Li Zhuge and the Li clan's 4th uncle, who knew the truth, were also dead. Therefore, no one knew about the grudge between Leng Shiqi and the Li clan. At most, it could only be said that Eunuch Gao and Li Juecheng had a grudge. As Eunuch Gao's disciple, Leng Shiqi naturally stood on the opposite side. This point alone was not worthy of suspicion. If anyone wanted to suspect, they had to suspect Eunuch Gao. As for the grudge between the Crown Prince and Leng Shiqi, it was actually not that big. Although He Dai and a few others knew about it, the Crown Prince had offended many people and formed many grudges. One more Leng Shiqi would not make a difference. Of course, Leng Shiqi was also someone who had a grudge against both Li Juecheng and the Crown Prince. Perhaps he would be suspected, but that grudge was far from enough to kill. Moreover, in the eyes of outsiders, Ling Shiqi did not have the qualifications to kill Li Juecheng and the crown prince. Unfortunately, they were all wrong. Ling Shiqi not only dared to kill, but also had the strength to kill them. Everyone was deep in thought, speculating about who the murderer was and whether or not he was hiding nearby. Little did they know that the real murderer was standing right next to them. Ling Shiqi looked at everyone with the intention of watching a good show. During this time, Heavenly Master He Yan did glance at Ling Shiqi, but he quickly looked away. After a while, he said, "Now that Li Juecheng and the crown prince are dead, they might have angered someone in private, but we don't know." "You're right." The humble prince had not appeared for many years and did not know about the grudge between them. He agreed with Heavenly Master He Yan's opinion. "I've already gone to see old Master Qiao. He has already left the mountain. As long as that mysterious metaphysical realm cultivator appears again, he will definitely be discovered. By then, no matter how strong he is, we must let him know the strength of the Thunderflame dynasty." At the end of his speech, the humble prince exuded a fierce and domineering aura. The might of a king was fully displayed. Ling Shiqi decided not to use the power of law so easily near the imperial capital in the future. If he was caught by that old Master Qiao, he would definitely die. The dignity of the Thunderflame dynasty cannot be touched. Prime Minister Mo Linhui said, "However, I'm worried about something. The crown prince was supposed to ascend the throne next month, but he died in an accident. I'm very heartbroken. However, the country can't be without a ruler. The throne of the Thunderflame dynasty has been empty for almost a year. We should appoint another crown prince as soon as possible to reassure the people. I summoned you here to discuss this matter." The humble prince also felt a headache when the crown prince was mentioned. The late Emperor Lei Qingjun had long deprived Lei Haoyan and the other princes of the right to compete for the position of crown prince. Before he died, he could only give the position of crown prince to Lei Haoga, who was a general among dwarves. However, Lei Haoga had died. In this way, there seemed to be no suitable candidate among the remaining princes. King Hui and King An were definitely not suitable. Lei Haoyan and Lei Haoran were not suitable either. Otherwise, they would be violating the late emperor's decree. What should they do? "Do you have any candidates to recommend?" the humble prince asked. The civil and military officials in the imperial court whispered to each other, but after a long time, no one stood out to say anything. Chapter 727. The humble prince sighed. It was quite funny that the Thunderblaze dynasty couldn't even find a successor for the throne. In fact, the Thunderblaze dynasty was so powerful that the person sitting on the throne didn't have to be smart or hardworking. As long as the person didn't waste money and was an honest emperor, the Thunderblaze dynasty didn't need the emperor to do anything. However, people like King An and King Hui weren't worthy of the throne. The best of them were directly excluded from the list of candidates by the late Emperor Lei Qingjun. Therefore, it was very awkward. The humble prince regretted agreeing to let Lei Qingjun go crazy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to do anything. He could continue to cultivate in seclusion and explore the metaphysical realm. That was what he really wanted. Otherwise, he could have sat on the throne decades ago. Now, the humble prince only wanted to find someone who could sit on the throne peacefully and not cause any trouble. Just when he was having a headache, he and Heavenly Master He Yan suddenly stared at each other. They were both ethereal realm cultivators. One was the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards, and the other was a prince who didn't care about the throne at all. However, the two of them had such expressions on their faces. It was obvious that something big had happened. Everyone felt that something was wrong. Some of them secretly wondered if the mysterious metaphysical realm cultivator had made his move again. The cultivators in the basilica looked outside the basilica at the same time. Their eyes were filled with shock, including Ling Shiqi. They could clearly feel that there were more than 30 bursts of powerful spiritual energy outside the basilica like a volcanic eruption. Even the atmospheric energy was being stirred up. Ling Shiqi and the others rushed out of the basilica. They saw more than 30 figures standing in the air and looking down at them. They were all ethereal realm cultivators. Everyone secretly gasped. Since when did ethereal realm cultivators become so common? What kind of force could have so many ethereal realm cultivators? What were they trying to do by breaking into the palace? The humble prince looked at those people with a sullen face. He couldn't figure out how so many Sky Origin stage cultivators could get into the royal capital without being noticed by the array. He only knew that if those people attacked together, the entire royal capital would be in ruins by now. Heavenly Venerable Black Flame recognized them one by one. Elder Bu from the wonderful 10,000 Laws sect, the high priest of the wizard tribe, the sect master of the purgatory demon sect, the sect master of the divine dueling mountain, the vice pavilion master of the blood cloak pavilion, the palace master of the sky expanse palace, the supreme elder of the ultimate saber hall, the sect master of the evil heart sword sect, the mountain sea sect's pavilion master Huang, the alliance master of the Five Flags Alliance. Every time he said a name, the hearts of the others would beat violently. These people were the leaders of the top sects on the world sect ranking. They were also the strongest. Each of them would cause a commotion if they appeared alone. But now, all of them had appeared at the same time. This kind of status and strength gave people a pressure that was difficult to describe with words. Even many masters of Gang's spirit realm found it hard to breathe and blacked out. They couldn't believe what they had seen. Leng Shiqi also found it hard to believe. Those ethereal realm cultivators were all powerful figures. He had seen some of them and was familiar with some of them. Elder Bu of Wonderful Sect had been here at Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet. At that time, he was watched by 8 masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship. He must have been furious. Head Huang of Mountain Sea Sect had shown up when the Phantom Spirit's secret land was opened. He even used his own power to maintain the entrance of the secret land. As for Ink Frost Ghost, the deputy head of the blood-robed pavilion, he was even more so. At this time, Ink Frost Ghost secretly transmitted a message to Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi, seize this opportunity. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed. What does Ink Frost Ghost mean? Then, the masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship finally arrived. When they saw so many ethereal realm cultivators, they were also shocked. These experts from the Imperial Consecration Hall were used to being high and mighty. But now, they were facing 2 times their number of experts. Among them were the sect leader and grand elder. Even the Imperial Consecration Hall couldn't withstand it. The humble prince looked at Elder Bu who was standing in the front. What do you want to do by breaking into the palace? Elder Bu snorted, what do we want to do? Lei Qingjua, you really know how to play dumb. 1 year ago, you were really awe-inspiring when you destroyed dozens of sections. But do you know that the imperial capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty can disappear from the world at any time? Leng Shiqi looked at the ethereal realm cultivators in the sky and finally understood. These masters came from various top sections. 90% of the top sects in the Thunderblaze dynasty were here. The only reason they came here was to deter. It could also be said that they came from the spirit cultivation sect's counterattack. 1 year ago, Lei Qingjua destroyed 3 top sects and dozens of first-rate sects in a fit of anger, shocking the world. Originally, everyone thought that the spirit cultivator sects in the Thunderfire dynasty would be afraid of being beaten and would be well-behaved. But they miscalculated. Now, all the top sects in the Thunderblaze dynasty, except for the Jadefall Island near the Eastern Sea, had secretly joined forces to break into the palace. One had to know that these top sects didn't get along well with each other. Yet, they could disregard their former enmity and directly break into the palace. It could be seen that the Thunderblaze dynasty had forced them into a corner. Looks like you all came with ill intentions. The humble prince's tone also turned cold. Elder Bu was even more unyielding. So what if they come with ill intentions? I really want to know what the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty will do when all the experts of the Imperial Consecration Hall of the Thunderflame dynasty and all the courtiers and generals in the imperial capital are dead. Hearing this, the humble prince's face turned gloomy. The officials below were even more shocked. If they all died, the Thunderblaze dynasty would definitely fall into an unprecedented state of weakness. The Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. At that time, they would definitely mobilize their troops to attack. The few Heaven Origin Realm experts at the border would definitely not be able to defend against the joint attack of the two dynasties. The Thunderblaze dynasty was in danger. No one would have thought that the spirit cultivation sects would be such a threat to the Thunderblaze dynasty. How did you all come in? The humble prince shouted angrily, almost losing his composure. The Thunderblaze dynasty had naturally been on guard against these Heaven Origin Realm experts. Otherwise, it would be terrible if they came to cause trouble for no reason. Therefore, there were a large number of high-grade formations near the imperial capital. As long as an expert above the Heaven Origin Realm approached, they would be discovered. But where did they come from? At this moment, the void suddenly shattered into a pitch-black hole. An old man with white hair and a youthful face walked out. With the Sky Amplification Palace Lord here, those formations are nothing. The humble prince immediately felt confident when he saw this old man. He immediately greeted respectfully, "Old Man Xiao." This old man was the Thunderblaze dynasty's mystic comprehending realm expert. Once he appeared, the Imperial Consecration Hall and the civil and military officials finally heaved a sigh of relief. With Old Man Xiao here, there would definitely be no problem. Many people also looked at the Sky Amplification Palace Lord. The Sky Amplification Palace was also one of the top 7 sects in the world. It was known for its formations. With him taking action, it was indeed possible to pass through the Thunderblaze dynasty's formations and directly enter the imperial capital. However, in the next moment, 6 different colored spirit lights suddenly flashed in the sky. The terrifying throbbing caused the Heaven Origin Realm experts' expressions to change. A middle-aged man in a purple robe walked out of the spirit lights with an ancient aura. It was as if he had transmigrated from the ancient times. He smiled and said, "Old Man Xiao, long time no see. You're still alive." Old Master Xiao frowned and said, "Six Directions Spiritual Supremacy." Chapter 728. The Six Directions Spirit Realm was one of the 4 Saint Spirit Realms, and this Six Directions Spirit Sovereign was the current ruler of the Spirit Realm. He was also a Tongxian Realm expert. Old Man Xiao and the Shoddy Prince's hearts sank. These spirit cultivator sects had even invited a Six Directions Spirit Sovereign. From the current battle strength, the Thunderfire dynasty was actually at an absolute disadvantage. It could be seen that they were extremely resentful towards the Thunderfire dynasty, and the Shoddy Prince also knew that it was impossible for them to be kind today. His eyes turned golden, and the origin energy around him shook. You can even invite the reclusive Six Directions Spirit Sovereign out of seclusion. You guys are quite capable, but don't even think about threatening my Thunderfire dynasty. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign said, "Even now, you're still so strong." This is also your Thunderfire dynasty's usual attitude towards spirit cultivator sections. You can't blame others for today's disaster. Ling Shiqi's eyes moved slightly. This matter was actually predicted by Lei Haoyan a year ago. The spirit cultivator sects would retaliate against the Thunderfire dynasty sooner or later, but no one expected it to come so early. And the timing was also very good. It was when the Thunderfire dynasty's throne was empty and power was scattered. Other than that, Crown Prince Lei Haoga was also assassinated by Ling Shiqi. So, let alone the throne, there was not even a crown prince. If today's battle really turned into a river of blood, the Thunderfire dynasty would not gather their strength to fight against the enemy. Instead, there would be internal strife for the throne first. No one wanted to see such a situation. If Ling Shiqi could think of this, so could the Shoddy Prince and the others. But the Shoddy Prince was still so strong. From this, it seemed that the Thunderfire dynasty had indeed formed a strong stance against spirit cultivator sections. This was already imprinted in their bones. The only one who could see it clearly, Lei Haoran, was stripped of his status as a prince and imprisoned for life. At this time, the palace lord of the Yen Palace said, "Lei Qingjue, the heavenly thunderfire annihilation formation of the imperial capital is a supreme-level formation. Unfortunately, the formation core, the heavenly thunderfire pearl, has been sealed by your own people. I'm afraid that the spiritual energy inside will leak out. Now, it will take time to remove the seal. This little bit of time is enough to make you die without a burial ground. Then, he suddenly shouted, "Formation!" Immediately after, dozens of Sky Origin stage cultivators formed a complicated formation with 6 directions spiritual sovereign as the center. In an instant, the weather changed, and the entire imperial city darkened. Specks of light intertwined to form a cage, completely trapping the imperial palace. Just the thought of using a Tongxian realm expert as the core of the formation and numerous Heaven's Origin realm experts as the formation flags was terrifying. Old Man Xiao immediately pointed at the void. Immediately, the space cracked and cracks spread out. However, 6 directions Spirit Sovereign waved his hand, and the golden light from his primordial spirit soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, all the spatial cracks had been smoothed out. Old Man Xiao, I heard that you managed to enter the mystic comprehending realm by comprehending a sliver of the law of space with the help of an external object. However, the law of space was easily erased by me. Looks like the rumors are true, 6 directions spiritual sovereign mocked. Old Master Qiao was expressionless and did not reply. He had already lost to 6 directions spiritual supremacy in a probing exchange of blows just now. If they were to really fight, he would not have any advantage either. This way, the 30 or so heavenly Yuan stage cultivators from the Spirit Cultivators sect would be able to unleash their anger without restraint. The imperial city would definitely be destroyed. Old Master Qiao hurriedly transmitted his voice to the shoddy prince. Let's listen to their conditions and stall for time. Quickly send someone to bring the heavenly thunderfire pearl and activate the heavenly thunderfire annihilation formation. The shoddy prince understood. He raised his head and looked at 6 directions spiritual sovereign. Fighting to the death with the Thunderfire dynasty will not benefit you at all. Even if the dynasty declines or even perishes, before that happens, we will drag you down with us. Today, this king admits defeat. Tell me your conditions. The moment these words were spoken, many of the ministers below were unwilling. If the Thunderfire dynasty gave in this time, there might be a next time. Furthermore, the Thunderfire dynasty could no longer suppress those spirit cultivator sects like they were doing now. However, they were suppressed by the aura of the heavenly Yuan stage cultivators to the point that they did not even dare to breathe loudly. No one dared to say a word. 6 directions spiritual sovereign and the rest laughed lightly. If you had said so earlier, there would have been no need to make things so tense. We only have one condition. Disband the Discipline Commission and the Dark Lightning Guards, and we will retreat immediately. Impossible. The shoddy prince rejected immediately. The Discipline Commission intimidated all the spirit cultivator sects, and the Dark Lightning Guards were the strongest intelligence network of the Thunderfire dynasty. They were equivalent to the right-hand men of the Thunderfire dynasty. Disbanding the Discipline Commission and the Dark Lightning Guards was no different from cutting off one's own arms. Lei Qingjue, this sovereign is not discussing with you. 6 directions spiritual sovereign shook his head and said, if you agree, we will retreat. If not, we will massacre the imperial capital. Suddenly, a coiling dragon spear appeared in the shoddy prince's hand. This was one of the rare level 8 earth weapons of the Thunderfire dynasty, the imperial might coiling dragon spear. Then let's try it. Elder Bu of the mysterious 10,000 Laws sect took out his spiritual sword and pointed it at the shoddy prince. Last time, you stopped me. Let me see how powerful the Thunderfire dynasty's inherited cultivation technique is. The imperial might coiling dragon spear in the shoddy prince's hand roared furiously. Instantly, the sky was dyed golden. Waves of power that looked down on the world descended, and a corner of the array that was set up in mid-air was torn apart by him. Elder Bu was surrounded by an illusory light. He pointed his spiritual sword, and the colored glaze illusion turned into a dreamland. At the same time, layers of arrays that were thousands of feet long flashed behind him. The origin energy of heaven and earth vibrated and turned into a 9 heavenly lotus. As the two heaven origin realm experts fought, Heavenly Master He Yen immediately set up a thick layer of black flames to protect everyone. Ling Shiqi observed the battle carefully. Judging from the movements, the shoddy prince and Elder Bu's cultivation was definitely stronger than the old man and Lin Yuanliang's. They were not just borrowing the origin energy of heaven and earth. They were also infusing their own understanding of the heavenly Tao. The shoddy prince shook his spear, and a dragon roared. A golden dragon jumped out. At the same time, a god of war holding a spear that was thousands of feet tall appeared behind him. This was his cosmic form. Once a heaven origin realm expert used his cosmic form, it meant that he had used all his strength. As the spear stabbed out, the void trembled. Along with a huge wave, the 9-colored lotus was shattered. At the same time, the shadow of a giant bear appeared between heaven and earth. Sun Tiangan, the chief commander of the patrol guards, also made his move. Monarch Cloud Shuttle, the chief commander of the Discipline Commission, opened his mouth slightly. A strange fog instantly covered the entire palace. Even the senses of the heaven origin realm experts were suppressed by it. The rest of the experts from the Imperial Hall of Worship and the Spirit Cultivator sects also made their moves. One cosmic form after another appeared in the palace, and the origin energy of heaven and earth within hundreds of miles became violent. There was only one person who was an exception. He was the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Blood Robe Pavilion, Black Frost Ghost. He hid his body directly. No one present could find him, including Old Man Xiao and Six Directions Spirit Elder. The power displayed in front of them was strong, but the heaven origin realm assassin hiding in the dark was even more terrifying. This made the experts from the Imperial Hall of Worship feel even more pressure. This was the terrifying part of the Blood Robe Pavilion. At the same time, the weather in the Imperial capital was completely chaotic. Thunder, wind, and earthquake happened one after another. It was like the end of the world, and it made people tremble in fear. Especially when no one knew what was going on. This kind of unknown terror made people panic. Of course, the most chaotic place was inside the palace. There were dozens of heaven origin realm experts confronting each other. It was a shocking scene, especially Old Man Xiao and Six Directions Spirit Elder. With them as the center, the space around them was constantly shattering. No one dared to get close to them. A shocking battle was about to happen. Chapter 729. The number of heavenly origin realm cultivators on the Thunderfire dynasty's side was much lesser than the spirit cultivator sects. Furthermore, the heavenly origin realm cultivators could not be determined by numbers alone. Regardless of the realm, there was a difference in strength. The Thunderfire dynasty's Imperial Hall of Worship sounded grand, but most of the people inside were recruited by the Thunderfire dynasty. Some of them were rogue cultivators. Some had enmity with the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty, and some were nurtured by the Thunderfire dynasty themselves. For example, Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, Monarch Cloud Shuttle, and the others were like that. When they left their positions as Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Division's Great Commander, they would also enter the Imperial Hall of Worship. Therefore, the strength of the experts in the Imperial Hall of Worship was uneven. On the Spirit Cultivator sect side, they were either sect masters, or grand elders. They enjoyed the highest status and resources of the top sects, so their strength definitely surpassed the Imperial Hall of Worship. In fact, the few heavenly origin realm cultivators on the Thunderfire dynasty's side already had thoughts of escaping. The reason why they were still here was because they were waiting for the Thunderfire heaven punishing formation. As long as the formation was activated, they would have a chance of winning. The shoddy prince shouted sternly, "Even if you are very strong, you should be careful of losing a few teeth if you want to swallow us. All of you are the leaders of your sections. Once you die, what will happen to your sects? Maybe the people standing beside you will swallow your sections." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign said coldly, "Lei Qingjue, don't try to sow discord. I know you are stalling for time. I will ask you one last time. Do you agree or not? the shoddy prince fell silent. His expression was extremely stiff. As a heavenly origin realm cultivator, he felt so uncomfortable because Six Directions Spirit Sovereign and the others gave him too much pressure. Strictly speaking, his decision today would even affect the rise and fall of the Thunderfire dynasty. Ling Shiqi was also guessing what decision the shoddy prince would make. Regardless of whether he agreed or not, it would be an extremely heavy blow to the Thunderfire dynasty. At the same time, Ling Shiqi could not help but curse inwardly. The Thunderfire dynasty actually did something stupid like sealing the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl. They clearly knew that the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl was the formation core of the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation. Wasn't the formation used to prevent accidents from happening? But now, the Thunderblaze dynasty had fallen into such a huge disadvantage because they had not been able to activate the formation immediately. However, the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl was sealed because the Thunderfire dynasty's imperial family was afraid of the Thunderfire Pearl's power leaking. The Heavenly Origin Realm, the Pearl, and the Heavenly Pearl, they had never stopped developing Heavenly Origin Pearl's Pearl. And the Heavenly Origin Realm Pearl were. In addition, the imperial family had also made a guarantee that if an outsider obtained the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl, they would not be able to use it. It was killing two birds with one stone. However, they did not expect that it was precisely because Lei Qingjun had allowed the Thunderfire Heavenly Bead to appear in Void Scar Sky that the people from the Spirit Cultivator sects had seen through it. This was also one of the reasons why so many experts had abandoned their previous enmity to find trouble with the Thunderfire dynasty. The fact that the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation could not be activated directly was a huge flaw, which almost forced Prince Ruijin into a desperate situation. In Ling Shiqi's view, today's matter could not possibly be settled peacefully. If the humble prince did not agree, there would be a great battle. Even cultivators at the Sky Origin stage would die, not to mention cultivators at the Oneness of Heaven and Men stage or lower. If the Emperor agreed, the Dark Thunder Guards and the Masters of the Discipline Department would have to give up their lives. Otherwise, the Spirit Cultivator sect would not listen to the Emperor's words. Ling Shiqi guessed that the Emperor would agree first and delay further. However, this would be even more dangerous for Ling Shiqi. If the lives of the Dark Thunder Guards and the experts of the Discipline Commission were exchanged for the activation of the Heaven-Slaying Thunderfire Array, it was absolutely worth it. Ling Shiqi saw that the situation was not good and quietly retreated to the back of the crowd. As long as there was a situation that was disadvantageous to him, he had to escape first even if he had to expose his strength. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind, Ling Shiqi, Lei Qingzhuo will definitely agree first. Later, Six Directions Spiritual Elder will attack the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. That will be the time for you to make a great contribution. The owner of this voice was the Ink Frost Ghostly Man. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He had already understood Ink Frost Ghostman's intention, and he nodded subtly. However, he did not put his life on the Ink Frost Ghostly Man. He quietly opened the system store interface and bought a mysterious item. Sure enough, just as Ling Shiqi and the Ink Frost Ghostly Man expected, the Emperor's face darkened and he said stiffly, I agree to your conditions. Disband the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. Words are not proof. Just this courage alone made the experts of the Imperial Hall of Worship feel ashamed of their inferiority. It also made many people from the Spirit Cultivator sect sigh that there were still talents in the Thunderflame dynasty. Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, Monarch Cloud Shuttle, the Emperor of Humble Governance, and Old Man Xiao all looked at Ling Shiqi with complicated expressions. The Emperor of Humble Governance clapped his hands and said, Good, good, good. What a loyal and courageous man. As expected of an important official of the Thunderflame dynasty, as expected of one of the 4 great managers personally appointed by the late Emperor. How can I hand over such a person? Even if we fight to the death today, my Thunderflame dynasty will accompany you to the end. Chapter 730. Ling Shiqi's actions were inconceivable to some people, but it also ignited the blood of a portion of the Thunderblaze dynasty's people, igniting their endless fighting spirit. Even Six Directions' spiritual sovereign could not help but take a second look at Leng Shiqi. In his eyes, Leng Shiqi was as weak as an ant, but his fearless courage moved Six Directions' spiritual sovereign. Being fearless is a good thing, but unfortunately, you did not recognize your own strength and the situation you are in. If you were a disciple of my Six Directions spiritual region, it would definitely nurture you well. What a pity, Six Directions spiritual sovereign said regretfully. Then, he stretched out a finger, and a mysterious divine energy gathered. He was going to kill Leng Shiqi with his own hands. It was a great honor to have this Tongxian realm expert, the region lord of Six Directions spiritual region, personally kill someone in the unity of heaven and man realm. Fight, the humble prince suddenly shouted. He raised his dragon spear, and a divine dragon descended, wanting to save Leng Shiqi. Old man Xiao was also about to make a move, but at that moment, a thick brilliance suddenly filled the sky above the 9 heavens. Waves of strange energy spread out, and all the heaven origin realm experts who were hovering in mid-air immediately felt the origin energy of heaven and earth sink. Then, they fell to the ground one by one. The dozens of heaven origin realm experts from the imperial family's hall of worship and the spirit cultivator sect looked up at the sky at the same time, their eyes flashing with astonishment. The only thing that could stir up the origin energy of heaven and earth and force everyone to fall was the power of law, which was above the origin energy of heaven and earth. At that moment, they felt waves of gravity pressing down on them. The gravity was not very strong, but they could not even think about flying. Only a Tongxian realm expert could have this kind of power. In the imperial city, other than Old Man Xiao and Six Directions spiritual sovereign, there was a third Tongxian realm expert. Six Directions spiritual sovereign immediately stopped. He and Old Man Xiao frowned deeply. They did not notice that there was another Tongxian realm expert nearby. This mysterious Tongxian realm expert had suppressed dozens of heaven origin realm experts before he even appeared. The power he displayed was too shocking. They did not know what this mysterious expert's intention was, and which side would he stand on. If he stood on the side of the Thunderflame dynasty, today's disaster would be resolved. One more Tongxian realm cultivator was too much of a threat to the Sky Origin realm. It could be said that it was a dimensional attack. There was no suspense, so the Spirit Cultivator sect had no chance of winning. If this Tongxian realm cultivator stood on the side of the Spirit Cultivator sect, even if the Thunderflame dynasty activated the Thunderflame Heaven Punishing Array, it would be useless. That was what the humble prince was most worried about. Not long ago, they had speculated that the person who killed Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge was a powerhouse at the metaphysic-reaching realm who had cultivated the law of gravity. Now, there was indeed such a person. From the looks of it, that mysterious expert had a grudge with the Thunderflame dynasty. The shoddy prince's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. The Thunderfire dynasty was already exhausted from dealing with the counterattack of the Spirit Cultivator sect. On top of that, there was also a Tongxian realm expert who was coincidentally targeting them. The Thunderblaze dynasty was truly unlucky to have both sides working together. The shoddy prince was already considering whether to use the Thunderblaze dynasty's final trump card. As long as they used that trump card, they still had a chance of winning. However, once they used it, the Thunderblaze dynasty's thousands of years of accumulation would be used up by more than half. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign also wanted to know the purpose of this mysterious expert. He raised his head and said, "I don't know when this Tongxian realm expert who cultivates the law of gravity appeared. Why don't you show yourself? Perhaps we have the same purpose today. Perhaps we can work together." "Not really." A heavy voice rang out from above the clouds. "The Thunderblaze dynasty's fate is not over yet. Your actions will not have any results. If you stop now, you will be less affected by karma." When this sentence was said, the people below had different reactions. The Spirit Cultivator sect instantly felt that something was wrong. From what they heard, this mysterious Tongxian realm expert seemed to want to help the Thunderblaze dynasty. If that was the case, they would miss the chance to join forces and force the Thunderblaze dynasty to submit. The shoddy prince and the others were like drowning people who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. However, they were also very confused. This mysterious expert had killed Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge, so he definitely had a grudge against the Thunderblaze dynasty. However, why was he standing on the Thunderblaze dynasty's side now? This was a really messy account. However, the shoddy prince would naturally not let go of such a good opportunity. He hurriedly said, "Senior, if you help the Thunderblaze dynasty tide over this crisis today, you will definitely repay me generously in the future." Old Master Qiao also said, "As long as you delay them a little, when the Thunderblaze heaven-punishing formation is activated, these people will not be a threat." This time, it was the Six Directions Spirit Sovereign and the others' turn to be gloomy. They had already wasted a lot of time, and the Thunderblaze heaven-punishing formation could be activated at any time. Once the formation was activated, even without the help of the mysterious expert, the Thunderblaze dynasty would be in an invincible position. At most, they could destroy the imperial capital. However, they could not damage the Thunderblaze dynasty's vitality. Perhaps some of them would be killed here. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign knew that the situation had completely reversed. They had become the anxious party, and with every passing moment, their lives would be in danger. He was unwilling to accept this. "Who exactly are you? Why are you helping the evildoers?" However, the mysterious expert only replied with one word, "Karma." "Karma? What bullsh** t karma?" Six Directions Spirit Sovereign suddenly shouted angrily without caring about his image. The four saint spiritual regions have been stagnant for tens of thousands of years because of the rumored karma. However, I do not believe in karma, nor do I believe in fate. I will lead the Six Directions spiritual region to break all karma. Everything in the world is predestined. Some things can't be forced. Let's stop. The arrow has already been knocked on the bow. Anyway, we have already come this far. I am also very interested in your strength." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign's body flashed with flowing light, causing the Heaven Origin stage cultivators to not dare to look directly at him. His battle intent reached the 9 heavens. Who else but him? The mysterious expert only said one word again, "It's too late." Not good. The Sky Amplification Palace Master's expression changed. There is a terrifying force under the palace that is about to erupt. The Thunderfire heaven-punishing formation is about to be activated. Old Man Xiao flipped his hand, and a series of explosions could be heard in the air. Spatial cracks as thick as an arm actually severed the formation that the Heaven Origin stage cultivators had set up. The Sky Amplification Palace Master shouted, "Spirit Sovereign, the situation is over. Let's take advantage of the fact that the Thunderfire heaven-punishing formation has not been fully activated and leave quickly." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign hesitated. If not for the mysterious Tongxian stage cultivator appearing out of nowhere, he would have already killed all the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. After that, he would cause the various powers to completely uproot their branches in every county. This way, his reputation would reach the peak. At that time, he would only need to wave his arm and all the spirit cultivator sects in the world would definitely submit to him. He would be able to easily lead the various large sects and become a superpower that could surpass the Thunderfire dynasty. This was his true plan. However, all of this would be in the hands of this mysterious expert. He was filled with hatred and anger, but he also knew his own situation. If he did not retreat now, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Instead, the reputation of the Six Directions spiritual region would fall to the freezing point, and he would no longer have a chance. A sharp killing intent flashed across Six Directions Spirit Sovereign's eyes. "I don't care who you are. Since you keep talking about karma, then your appearance has also infected yourself with my karma. The next time we meet, you will die, and I will die." Finally, he looked at the shoddy prince. The Thunderfire dynasty has good fortune, but this is only the beginning. Let's go. Shortly after, Six Directions Spirit Sovereign waved his hand, and layers of divine light broke through the gravitational space. The 30-odd heaven origin stage cultivators that the spirit cultivators sects had joined together turned into streams of light and flew away. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.